welcome back. Today we're talking about Chapter 14, which is contract administration. You think about this whole process that we've done. You know, we get recognized, we talked about that. Then we negotiated, we talked about that. Well, so now we've got a union and we've got a contract. Well, now somebody's got to make sure that contract is followed. A lot of people think, well, the contract is, you know, self-proclaiming and everybody will follow the contract. And you know for a fact, we don't follow contracts. Sometimes we don't follow them on purpose. Sometimes we follow them just because we're not paying attention. But the point is, we really don't follow contracts. That's why we write them out, so somebody can say, see what it said and you didn't do this, or et cetera, et cetera. So you have to have contract administration. Absolutely. Now, here's the deal. We've got two parties. We've got the union and we've got the company. The company usually takes the lead in contract administration. As long as the union is getting paid what the contract said they were going to pay, as long as they're getting the benefits that the contract said they would get, the union doesn't fuss. The union's not ever going to say, we didn't work quite as long as we should have worked this week, or we didn't produce as much as we should have produced this week, or we didn't. The union's not going to do that. So it's up to management to look at the contract and say, this is what the union said they were going to do. Did they do it? And that's just naturally what kind of happens. There are several issues that the contract always comes into play when you look at the administration of it. There are some key issues. Think about it. Those contracts are just inches thick sometimes. So there are a couple of key issues that people focus on because they know that's where the problem has been, and if we have a problem in the future, that's probably where it's going to be. So here's a list of things, problems that kind of creep up that we always have to go back to the contract and say, okay, we got this problem. What does the contract say we do in this situation? So this is major issues in contract administration. Number one, discipline. Nobody likes the discipline. Managers hate the discipline. Believe it or not, they do. You don't like to tell people they're not doing a good job. We're real bad at it. We go, come on, please, just try to do better next time. When it clearly says in the contract, you should be given a written warning. So we don't do it, and we don't do it, and then finally, and we're going to talk about discipline in a little while. So, but the point is, we always have a process of discipline. It's not the problem that we don't have the process. The problem is we don't follow it. Discipline issues should be spelled out specifically in the contract. It shouldn't be, well, we've got this problem, I wonder what we should do now. No, we've got this problem and this is what the contract says will happen. So discipline is a major issue there. Another major contract administrative issue are incentives. We said we'd give you this much for piecemeal, we'd give you this much for no days absence, we'd give you all these whatever. Let's make sure those were spelled out correctly, because I don't want to have an employee feeling like, well, I should get that incentive because I met the criteria, and then you go to the contract and the contract's kind of vague. You know, the days aren't specified or whatever, so that needs to be very clear when it comes to incentive. All right, is that cool or not cool? Work assignments. You've always heard the joke about unions, people walking around going, would you mind doing this? No, that's not my job. Hey, the plant's on fire. Could you grab a fire extinguisher and come help us? I'm sorry, that's not in my contract. It's not that bad, and you know it's not that bad because you're a human being and you don't act like that. But work assignments need to be clearly defined. The union worked for work assignments. The work assignments helps, the union thinks, to keep people employed, to give job security, so they're not going to let you mess with that. Like today, I want you boys to go on the loading dock when they're electrical workers. And so we need to be very clear about what people do what jobs. And that shouldn't be a difficult thing to do. But the contract needs to be very clear as to what people, what skill levels, what positions will do certain types of work. Hours of work will always be included. Hours of work, most people just assume 40 hours a week. Most people assume that anytime over 40 you get time and a half. That's a great assumption, but you know what happens when you assume things? So here's the deal. Hey, I worked this weekend. It says weekend work gets overtime. Well, the contract says that your week runs from Thursday to Wednesday. So when you were working Saturday, that was just part of your 40-hour week. You didn't have 40 hours yet, even though you'd been there the whole week before. So you need to be very clear as to what a work week is, how the work week is defined, what happens when you get over 40 hours, et cetera, what happens on weekends, what happens on vacations, what happens on holidays. Again, that kind of language needs to be in the contract. We don't need to be having a fight over that when we get to that. There should never be a question about was it overtime or was it not. The contract should be that specific. Production standards. Production standards. How much are we looking for our employees to produce in a week, in a day, in a quarter, et cetera, et cetera. So that at the end of that quarter, I can't come to you and go, you're a bunch of lazy no-goods, and I can sit there right there and go, no. Contract said, this is how much we would produce this month, this is how much we produce this month, you should be patting us on the back. Because it's always, you can give me more. You give somebody 100%, a lot of times they'll say, well, what about 103%? Why can't you give me that? No, spell it out. If you want 100 units a month and somebody gives you that, the only comment you should have to them is perfect. I cannot thank you enough. You did exactly what I asked you to do. And that's why both sides, the union and management, want that to be in the contract. Working conditions. It's hard to believe that in this day and time that needs to be an issue, but it does. Because I can show you some working conditions in the United States that aren't real pleasant. Sometimes it's the nature of the job. There's not a whole lot you can do. Sometimes, though, it's just a lack of attention to the workspace, to the conditions that let them deteriorate to the point where we're not in good working conditions. So that needs to be spelled out in the contract. These are the working conditions we're going to have. I'm talking about in terms of how the luminosity of the lights and the temperature of the air conditioning. I'm talking about what's stocked in the break room is in the contract sometimes. So if you want it to be enforced, if you want it to be there, either side, you need to make sure it's in the contract, because if it's not in the contract, it cannot be administered. Subcontractors. The unions despise subcontractors. Subcontractors means the company's paying other workers to do work, and the union wants to do all of the work and wants to get all of the pay. So you will have a lot of fussing and fighting about when can companies use subcontractors. I'm not talking about putting it offshore. I'm not talking about sending it overseas. I'm talking about hiring company B to come in here and do some kind of maintenance that the union workers could provide, but we've decided to sub this out. Unions fight this tooth and nail. Companies will try to put this in, not only because of wage, but because of I only need them 2 months a year. So there's all kind of reasons why I would want to use subcontractors. It would be more difficult for the union to provide that, but this is a huge sticking point. And the last one is, and I've talked about this, this could be all up in the ones we've talked about, but rules. What are the rules of engagement here? Everything from when do I come to work? What's the end of the work day? Where do I park? Where do I eat? Just what are the rules around here? I don't want there to be any ambiguity here. I want people to know that, number one, they could read it if they wanted to. I doubt they will. They could read it if they wanted to. And number two, I can tell you when things are not working like they should be working. So you want to make sure that these things are present. They will always be present in a contract. They'll always be present in the fact that you administer these things in the contract. So both sides will know these things back and front. There's no doubt about it. If either manager in the union or the company is worth their salt, these things will be on the tip of their tongue. They won't have to go to the contract to be able to say, this is what it says about that area. Now let's talk about grievance. Grievance is when an employee has a grievance against the company. the worker has a complaint against, excuse me a minute. Dadgum, I hadn't talked to Peyton Manning. And Peyton, what's up? Peyton, is that you? Hey man, what's up? How's Denver? Yeah, I told you it gets cold out there. No, look, I helped you when you were with the Colts. I spent a lot of time I shouldn't have spent with you. I enjoyed it, but you're a grown man. You should know. Look, you're just going to have to get tougher. I'm sorry. I know it's hard to breathe in Denver. You knew that before you went. Quit whining. God almighty. All right, look, I'm right in the middle of something. I can't help you right now. All I can say is your follow-through's getting a little short. You need to continue it. All right, anyway, let me call you tonight, okay? I really can't. All right, bye. I'm sorry about that. I apologize. Like a baby, just a baby. Anyway, grievance is when an employee, a worker, looks at the company, yeah, that's right. The worker looks at the company and goes, dude, you're not doing what you said. You're not following the contract. You're not honoring your commitment that you signed and said you would do. So there's some steps in the grievance process, basically 4. Even though that's 8, but basically 4. All right, the first thing is you let the company know they have violated one of their aspects. You let your first line manager know, hey dude, I'm not getting, I've been working this overtime on the weekends, it's not showing on my paycheck, or whatever your grievance is. You're not holding up to your end of the contract. If it's not settled by your supervisor saying, look, let me check on that, and that's usually what will happen. Supervisor will go, let me check what's happened. Yeah, payroll messed up. I forgot to write it down. There's an answer. We'll pay you. Everything will be fine. Second step, if it's not settled there, you go to your steward. You go to your union steward and you say, I've complained. This guy is not helping me one bit. I'm working on weekends. I'm not getting the pay structure scale I should be getting. So I want you to fix that. The steward, now an official union representative, will go to Human Relations, the person in HR who supposedly is administering this or has some degree of authority over this contract on the management side. So this is like an official grievance when you get the steward involved. We're on record as saying we tried to fix this, kind of just off the books. You didn't do anything. So now we're officially bringing it to Human Resources going, you guys ain't doing what you're supposed to do, and we need you to step up and do this. You can try to settle this locally. If you're not getting any response from the local company, if the local union is not getting, obviously, the local company, then you might want to call, if you're the union, you might want to call the international union. The guys who have the lawyers, the guys who have the briefcases that will come in and try to push people around and use their power. So you might want to call the big guns to come in and go, you guys are not doing what you said you were going to do. If it cannot be fixed in that third opinion, that third volley of either the local union or the national union as a union getting involved in this, you can call in an arbitrator. And we all know about arbitration. We've already talked about arbitration. And we know that arbitration is final. So when you call the arbitrator in, remember both sides have to agree on the arbitrator, and there's a bunch of rules there. Basically, you are taking all of the decision making out of your hands and you're giving it to the arbitrator. Arbitrator's decision is final, cannot be appealed. We know all about that already. So you really don't want that to happen. You don't want the union to come in and go, we really need to just let this go to arbitration, because once it goes to arbitration, you've washed your hands. You have nothing else to do in your decision making process. Once it does go to arbitration, usually it's quick. Usually it's 2 weeks. Could be a little longer. I think the average is about 5 days. So, arbitration is not this lengthy process of legal arbitration. Legal court. It's one guy, one woman will come in, look at both sides, and make a decision very quickly. And that decision is absolutely final. So let's talk about, let's don't talk about anything. That's the end of that. That's the end of chapter 14. which is contract administration. Remember, it's one thing to have a contract, it's another thing to have somebody follow the contract. So once you get the contract, it's not all, let's all go out for a beer now. Once you have a contract, both sides need to sit down and focus on what the contract says to make sure that the other party is following that contract. So thank you all very much, and we'll see you next time.